Good morning, everyone. So I'll continue with my recording with the advanced implant surgical procedures. In the last record session, we have seen the standard implant surgical procedures, which is based on the presence of adequate width and height of the alveolar bone, and the implants are placed in a surgically, a prosthetically driven position so that we can achieve a good aesthetic and functional implant restoration. But most of the times, the patient report for tooth replacement after few years of tooth loss, and there is a lot of alveolar bone resorption both in the vertical as well as in the horizontal dimension, and there is a lot of bone loss and which leads to narrow alveolar ridges. In such narrow alveolar ridges, it is very difficult to place the implants, and sometimes there may be presence of adequate width and height of the alveolar bone may be present, but uh, it may not be located in the appropriate position. So in such situations, the alveolar bone regeneration is done uh, so that the implant can be placed in a prosthetically driven position, and so as to achieve a good aesthetic and functional implant restoration. Average alveolar bone resorption of about 1.5 to 2 millimeters vertically and about 40 to 60% horizontally have been reported in the literature, and this resorption varies among the individuals and varies among different sites within the same person. The deformities and defects may occur as a result of the tooth loss due to extraction, advanced periodontal disease or trauma, long-term use of removable appliances, dehiscence and fenestration defects, developmental defects or clefts, congenitally missing teeth, odontogenic cysts and tumors. Ridge augmentation procedures include ridge preservation, bone regeneration in the fresh extraction sockets, horizontal and vertical bone augmentation, ridge splitting or expansion, maxillary sinus lift, and bone augmentation. According to Siebert in 1983, alveolar crest defects have been classified into three types: class 1, class 2, and class 3. Class 1 defects when the bone deficiency is predominantly in the horizontal dimension, class 2 defects when the bone deficiency is predominantly in the vertical dimension, and class 3 defects when the bone deficiency affects both vertical and horizontal dimension. Hamel and Jung have classified crust defects in the fresh extraction sockets into three types, that is class 1, class 2, and class 3. Class 1 extraction socket that has intact bone walls after tooth extraction. Class 2 extraction socket that has marginal dehiscence of the buccal wall after tooth extraction, and the class 3 extraction socket that has large buccal bone wall defect after tooth extraction. At this point, it's very important for us to understand two important points. One is to do the treatment plan before extracting any tooth, and second thing is to do the extraction as conservatively as possible. So for any patient who report to us for tooth extraction, before we remove the tooth replacement should be planned, and various tooth replacement modalities should be explained to the patient, and uh, we should come to one conclusion on how to replace that tooth before extracting it. So there are various modalities like fixed partial dentures or removable partial dentures or implant supported uh, tooth replacement, implant supported prosthesis. So if the patient is interested in the implant supported restorations, so before extracting the tooth, various pre-surgical evaluation such as the radiographic evaluation has to be done, and to find out whether there is any presence of dehiscence or fenestration defects in the buccal bone wall or the buccal bone wall or the lingual bone wall, and and these implant placement after tooth extraction can be classified into three types, that is immediate implant placement, delayed implant placement, and staged implant placement. Immediate implant placement occurs immediately after the extraction of the tooth, whereas delayed implant placement is done approximately after 2 months of extraction of the tooth, which allows the soft tissue healing, which allows the soft tissues to close the extraction socket. So that will help in avoiding the further soft tissue augmentation procedures. Whereas in a stage implant placement, which happens after about 4 to 6 months of extraction, which allows the complete healing of bones, complete healing of the socket with the socket, and the implants are placed in a healed bone and soft tissues. So in class 1 and class 2 defects, where there is a presence of intact bone wall or where there is a partial dehiscence of the uh, marginal dehiscence of the buccal bone wall, immediate or delayed implant placement can be done. Whereas in a large dehiscence of the buccal wall, staged implant is more preferable. So whenever the implant has to be placed immediately after extraction, there are few requirements. The primary requirement for primary requirement for immediate implant placement is the presence of apical to the bone apical to the socket. That is, at least 3 millimeters of bone should be present apical to the socket, and the bony walls of the socket should be intact. This is for providing the initial primary stability for the implant. So whenever the implant is placed in the immediate implant placement after extraction, it should be placed at least 2 millimeter subcrustally for the so that the implant threads remains covered by the bone even after there is a if there is any bone resorption after the of the socket wall. So when the implant can be placed both in the, as we discussed in the last session, the standard implant placement, the implant can be placed either with the two-stage surgical technique or with the one-stage surgical technique. So whenever it is possible to achieve a good torque or good initial stability of about 40 to 45 Newton centimeter, it's preferable to do a one-stage implant surgical technique. And whenever it is not possible to achieve a initial primary stability of 40 to 45 Newton centimeter, whenever there is implants cannot be stabilized in the, it cannot be fully stabilized in the extraction socket, a two-stage surgical technique is done, whereby connecting a cover screw immediately after placing the implant. We place the cover screw and the implant and the space between the implant and the bone, if it is more than 2 millimeter, need to be closed with the bone graft. Whenever it is the gap is less than 2 millimeter, it's called as jumping distance, where the bone grafting material may not be required. And if the implant is placed with the two-stage surgical technique, the soft tissues need to be mobilized more coronally, and the socket and the implant need to be completely covered by the soft tissues. So vertical incision should be given, and the periosteal releasing incision should be given, and the mucoperiosteal flap need to be mobilized more coronally, and the implant head need to be completely covered by the bone. So whenever it is possible to achieve a good initial stability of 40 to 45 Newton centimeter, the implant can be connected with the healing abutment, and implant can be placed with the one-stage surgical technique, where it is easier for the soft tissue approximation, and the most preferred way to manage the hard and soft tissues in a fresh extraction socket is by connecting a temporary restoration or immediate provisionalization of the crown, will help in maintaining the soft tissue architecture by maintaining the interdental papilla and the marginal gingiva, and it provides a best emergence profile, a good emergence profile for the implant crown. And in class 3 defects, when it is a when there is a large dehiscence of the buccal wall, the after the extraction, it need to be the socket need to be grafted, and then the membrane, if required, need to be placed, and then the soft tissues are should be fully should be mobilized if required coronally, and then the complete soft tissue coverage should be achieved. And the second most important thing which I was talking was to extract the tooth as conservatively as possible. The uh, the extraction should be carried on, should be conducted with the fine instruments such as periotomes, which is a narrow flat instrument which should be inserted from the through the gingival sulcus into the periodontal ligament space, and the periodontal ligament fibers should be severed with the periotome, and then the elevator should be used, and to elevate the tooth, and the forceps can be finally used to remove the tooth. When we are using the forceps, it's very important not to apply any buccolingual forces to maintain the integrity of the buccal bone. Only a gentle rotational forces can be used so that the buccal bone doesn't get damaged, or because buccal bone is the most delicate bone in this socket, and which gets resolved very fast. So when you're doing extraction, should not apply any should not apply any buccolingual forces. Only my gentle rotational forces can be applied. And in case of multi-rooted teeth, the roots can be sectioned, and should be taken out separately. And after taking out the roots, the socket should be the socket should be completely debrided of soft tissues. Any soft tissue remaining, or the any infection parts should be completely removed, and it should be thoroughly irrigated with the saline. And then the socket walls should be examined. If if there is a intact socket walls, if the socket walls are intact, that is in class 1 and class 2 defects, immediate implant placement or a delayed implant placement can be done. Delayed implant placement is similar to the immediate implant placement, but only thing is it will allow the soft tissues to heal, which will allow the healing for about 2 months, and that will completely cover the extraction sockets. And in case of class 3 defects, where there is a larger dehiscence of the buccal wall, uh, stage implant placement is preferable. By using the after complete debridement and irrigation with the saline, the socket need to be grafted with the bone graft material, and then the membrane can be used. The soft tissues can be mucogingival flaps can be slightly mobilized more coronally, and complete soft tissue closure is achieved. And then the implants are placed after about 6 months of healing. So let's see the alveolar ridge preservation and management of extraction. So as we all know, the tooth extraction, which leads to alveolar bone resorption and or alveolar bone loss, it's very important to preserve the alveolar ridges at the time of extraction. Most of the bone loss after extraction occurs in the first 6 to 24 months. The preservation of the alveolar bone should be initiated at the time of extraction. A conservative approach to the management of extraction sites can eliminate or significantly reduce the necessity of advanced bone augmentation procedure. Depending on the quality, quantity, and support of the existing bone, as well as the preferences of the clinician and patient, the placement of implants after tooth extraction can be immediate, delayed, or staged. Immediate implant placement occurs at the time of extraction. Delayed implant placement is performed approximately 2 months after extraction to allow for soft tissue healing. Staged implant placement allows for complete hard and soft tissue healing and permits placement of implants in the healed bone sites with the adequate coverage of hard and soft tissues. So the advantages of the immediate implant placement occurs at the time of extraction. Immediately after extraction, if the sockets walls are intact, the immediate implant placement is done. The advantages of immediate implant placement is that it helps in the preservation of the extraction socket, and it reduces the treatment time. Since the implants are placed in the extraction socket, which is where sockets, the Implant to bone healing will begin in the will take place in the with the healing of the extraction socket where the bone healing is taking place, and the implant extraction site is a osteogenically active, which helps in more formation of more bone on the implant on the implant surface. The disadvantages of immediate implant placement is if the implant is placed with the two-stage surgical technique, there may be a requirement to mobilize the mucogingival flap more coronally, and there may be subsequent surgeries may be required to manage the mucogingival discrepancies. Whereas the delayed implant placement will have the advantages of immediate implant placement, that is, it will help in preservation of the extraction site. Apart from that, it will have some more advantages such as the management of soft tissues. It becomes more easier because in delayed implant placement, which is done after 2 months after the extraction, which will allow the soft tissue healing, and which allow the soft tissues to completely cover the extraction wound, and the soft tissue management becomes more easier, and it will avoid the necessity for mucogingival surgeries or many or soft tissue augmentation procedures can be avoided with the delayed implant placement. And apart from that, it helps in resolution of any infections that may be present at the time of extraction. And the extraction sockets are still active in bone formation, whereas which is still osteogenically active, and there is more formation of bone on the implant surface. In the stage implant placement, whether it is with the bone graft or without the bone graft, which is allowed to which is allowed to heal for about 4 to 6 months, where there is a complete vascularization of the bone graft, and there is a complete healing of the socket, and there is a complete hard and the soft tissue healing is taken place, and then the implant is placed in a completely healed bone sites, and there is adequate coverage of the both hard and soft tissues, and there is which helps in the resolution of any previous infections that are present, and the soft tissue management will be more easier and may not require any subsequent soft tissue augmentation procedures. Next, we'll see the localized ridge augmentation procedures. Depending on the size and morphology of the defect, various augmentation procedures can be used. The deficient dimensions, as we discussed earlier, it may be horizontal or may be vertical. The methods used to augment horizontal as well as vertical bone deficiencies include particulate bone grafts and monocortical block grafts. Barrel membranes can be used with the bone grafts to reconstruct all types of alveolar bone defects. All proven principles of guided bone regeneration and flap management must be followed to achieve good results. These includes generating a good blood supply, that is by good management of the flap, as well as by providing cortical perforation with a small round burr, which will help in providing vascular supply to the graft material, and then by maintaining a stable protected space for bone growth, that is by using the bone graft materials along with the membrane, and by achieving a tension-free flap wound closure. The flap management is a very important part of localized ridge augmentation procedure. The incision, the reflection, and the management of the flap should be designed in such a way that it maintains a good blood supply and it helps in complete wound closure. The, the management of flap should always consider the increase in the dimension of the ridge after the grafting procedure. So it's very important to consider the flap approximation without any tension. So after the bone grafting procedure, there is increase in the size of the ridge. So by providing periosteal releasing incisions, the flaps can be it will provide elasticities to the flap, and it will helps in the mobilization of the flap and in a coronal direction, and complete closure of the flap without any tension, or it helps in achieving a tension-free flap wound closure. And the flap should be reflected at least 5 millimeters beyond the defect, and if vertical incisions as long as possible should be avoided, and if it is required it should be given in a remote location, at least two teeth anterior to the defect, or at least one tooth posterior to the defect, and the flap should be sutured with the approximation of the connective tissue by providing a horizontal matrix sutures, and the wound edges should be uh, approximated with the interrupted sutures. So first we'll see the particulate bone graft. Advantages of particulate bone graft or the bone chips are that the smaller pieces of bone demonstrate more rapid ingrowth of blood vessels, that is revascularization takes place easily, and there is larger osteoconduction surface and more exposure for osteoinductive growth factors, and easier biological remodeling compared with the bone block for reconstruction of large defects. However, particular bone grafts often lack rigid supportive structure and are much more easily displaced when compared with the block grafts. Autologous particulate bone grafts can be harvested from any edentulous jaw site, either in smaller particles by using a bone scrapers. Bone scrapers are available, which are disposable bone scrapers are available, and reusable bone scrapers are also available. The reusable ones should be autoclaved between the patients. And piezoelectric surgical units also can be used to harvest the particulate bone grafts. And block bone grafts uh, can be used for this preparing the particulate bone grafts. By block bone grafts can be harvested either from intraoral sites or from extraoral sites. Intraoral sites such as symphysis or ramus of the mandible, extraoral sites such as the iliac crest or the tibia bone. If bone has been harvested in a block, bone mill is necessary to particulate the bone and prepare it for transplantation in the bone defect. Here is a case of horizontal bone deficiency in the mandibular right first and second molar region. The crestal incision was given along with the clavicular incisions on the first and second premolar, and full thickness mucoperiosteal flap was reflected which was reflected at least 5 millimeters beyond the defect, and the vertical incisions as long as possible it should be avoided, and if it is required it can be given in a remote location, such as in this case it was given on the mesial side of the first premolar. And the cortical perforation should be done to provide vascularity to the bone graft. This is done with a small round burr in the defect area. And the next step was to place the membrane. In this case, the EPTF membrane, that is the expanded polytetrafluoroethylene membrane, was used, which was fixed to the lingual side first, and then the mixture of and then the bone graft, that is a mixture of 1:1 mixture of anorganic bovine bone with the autogenous bone mixture was placed on the defect, and then the membrane was stretched, and it was placed on the buccal side, and it was fixed to the native bone with the fixation screws or bone tacks or with the sutures. And then the periosteal releasing incision was given because the size of the ridges will increase after the grafting procedure, whereas this flap will not be able to cover this defect, it will cover this bone grafted site. So there is increase in the dimension. To provide more elasticity to the flap, a periosteal releasing incision should be given, and which will allow the flap to be mobilized more coronally, and then the complete flap approximation should be achieved uh, without any tension on the flap, and wound should be approximated with the horizontal matrix sutures and the interrupted sutures. Horizontal matrix sutures was given to approximate the connective tissue, whereas the interrupted sutures are given to adapt the wound edges. This is the healing that takes place after 6 months of healing, and then After 6 months, full thickness flap was reflected, and the membrane, that is the EPTF membrane, expanded polytetrafluoroethylene membrane, was removed. Bone tags were removed, and then this is the increase in the bone dimension, increase in the horizontal dimension that is achieved, and then the osteotomy is prepared. When the osteotomy is prepared, it's very important to maintain at least 3 millimeters of the bone on the regenerated bone. So this is the after placing the wide diameter implants. Particulate grafts are indicated in defects with multiple osseous walls that will contain the graft, or in dehiscence or fenestration defects when the implants are placed during the bone augmentation procedure. If bone defects doesn't have sufficient osseous walls to contain the graft, the barrier membrane placed in contact with the native bone should be secured along the periphery with the tacks, screws, or sutures. This bone graft and secured barrier membrane combination becomes an environment that is stable and supports the new bone formation. Next, we'll see the monocortical block grafts. The technique uses a cortical block of bone harvested from a remote site and used to increase the width of bone. The block graft taken from an intraoral, example mandibular symphysis or ramus, or extraoral, example iliac crest or tibia site, is fixated to the prepared site with the screws. The fixation hardware, the screws and plates, should be removed after an adequate healing period of about 6 months. The disadvantages of this technique is the biological limitation of revascularizing the large bone blocks, as we discussed earlier. So here is a case of monocortical bone graft augmentation procedure, which is planned in the uh, mandibular right first molar region. The mandibular second molar was indicated for extraction. We can see the sufficient amount of bone height that is available, but the clinical picture shows the horizontal bone deficiency in the first molar region. So in this case, the monocortical block graft augmentation was planned to increase the width of the alveolar bone, and ridge preservation was planned after extraction of second molar with the particulate bone graft. Here the crustal incision was given and the clavicular incision was given around the natural teeth, and then the second molar was extracted as conservatively as possible. All the soft tissues within the socket and on the alveolar ridge should be removed with the surgical curettes, and the site nicely irrigated with the saline. And then the cortical perforation was done in the and the recipient side, that is on the sixth area, and the first molar area, and where there is defect, and then the site is measured with the periodontal probe so as to harvest the required size of the graft from the donor site, that was this mandibular symphysis area. And in the harvested graft was shaped to fit nicely into the recipient bed, and it was fixated to the recipient bed with the fixation screws. And the second molar region was grafted with the particulate bone graft. And the gaps between this monocortical block graft and the recipient bed was filled with the particulate bone graft and a particulate bone graft. And here you can see the um, second molar site bridge preservation is the particulate bone graft and the monocortical graft that is fixed with the fixation screws. And this is a healing after 6 months. The fixation screw is slightly exposed because of the bone resorption. And after 6 months, the full thickness mucoperiosteal flap was reflected, the fixation screws were removed, and the osteotomy was prepared. While preparing the osteotomy, it's very important to maintain at least 3 millimeters of bone width on the regenerated bone. And the implants were placed, and this is the healing after the implant placement. And after the bone, after this healing, the second stage surgery or the exposure surgery of the exposure of the implant surgery was done, and the healing caps were connected, and which was again allowed to heal for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then the impressions were made, and the screw retained the crowns were fabricated in the lab, and they were fixed to the implants with the screws. And this is a picture showing the good occlusion and the nicely fitting diopter radiograph shows the nicely fitting prosthesis as well as the good amount of bone around the implants. So next procedure that we will see is a maxillary sinus elevation and bone augmentation. Rehabilitation of the edentulous posterior maxilla may be considered as a clinical challenge because of the reduction in the vertical height of the bone because of the pneumatization of the sinus, as well as because of the loss of teeth, which also leads to reduction in the vertical bone height. So it's a clinical challenge for placement of the dental implants. Moreover, this situation is more complicated because of the quality of the bone that is available in the posterior maxilla, which is usually a D4 type of bone, which is a loose trabecular bone, which is covered by a thin cortical shell of cortical bone. Before the bone augmentation procedure, the posterior maxilla with the reduced vertical height was could only be restored with the removable partial dentures or with the short implants or with the cantilevered processes. This cantilevered processes maybe can be done with the natural teeth or with the dental implants or with the endosseous implants. Historically, the failure rates of dental implants, endosseous dental implants, was much higher in the posterior maxilla when compared to any other anatomical location in the oral cavity. So, the maxillary sinus elevation and bone augmentation procedure is required to increase the vertical height of the bone in the posterior maxilla for the successful uh, placement of endosseous implants and successful treatment of tooth replacement in the posterior maxilla. The maxillary sinus elevation and bone augmentation procedure was first explained in 1960s by Boyne. He explained this procedure in his oral presentations to the United States dental postgraduates in about 1960s. And the first procedure for the sinus floor elevation and bone augmentation was explained by Boyne and James in 1980, where they gained access to the maxillary sinus through the Caldwell-Luck procedure, and they grafted the sinus floor with the autogenous bone, and they placed a blade type of implant to replace the missing teeth. And then the various procedures, various modification to the lateral window technique and the crustal window technique developed for the maxillary sinus floor elevation and bone augmentation procedures. The goal of sinus elevation and bone augmentation is to lift the Schneiderian membrane from the floor of the sinus, raising it up into the sinus cavity to create a new, more superiorly located sinus floor with the space between it and the deficient alveolar ridge. The newly created space can then be filled with bone or a suitable bone substitute material to increase the total vertical height of the bone in the posterior maxilla for the placement of endosseous implants. Simultaneous implant placement is possible with the sinus elevation and bone augmentation procedure as long as the implant can be stabilized in the desired location with the existing native bone. Literature has shown that about 5 millimeters of vertical bone height is required to place the implant simultaneously along with maxillary sinus for elevation and bone augmentation procedure. But some of the clinicians have proved that it is possible to place the implant simultaneously with the maxillary sinus elevation and bone augmentation in with the bone as less as 1 millimeter. It's more important to consider the implant stability than the bone height. As long as the implant can be placed with the good primary stability, the implant can be placed simultaneously with the maxillary sinus floor elevation. Let's see the Anatomy of the maxillary sinus briefly. Maxillary sinus, as you all know, is a pyramidal in shape with the base of it parallel to the lateral nasal wall and the apex is pointing towards the zygomatic bone. The superior wall is formed by the floor of the orbit and the anterior wall is constituted by the facial portion of the maxillary bone. Posterior lateral wall is constituted by the zygomatic bone and greater wing of sphenoid. Floor is constituted by the alveolar process and palatal process of maxilla. It extends between the adjacent teeth or individual roots, creating elevations of the antral surface, commonly referred to as hillocks. The inner surface of the maxillary sinus is lined by pseudostratified ciliated epithelium, which is about zero point 0.8 millimeters in thickness, and it continues with the nasal epithelium through the ostium in the middle meatus. The size of the maxillary sinus is usually insignificant before the eruption of the permanent teeth, and it gradually increases with the age, and it especially increases after the loss of teeth, which is known as maxillary sinus pneumatization. The primary indication for maxillary floor sinus floor elevation and bone augmentation procedure to increase the for the placement of endogenous dental implants to replace the missing teeth is the deficient vertical height in the posterior maxilla, that is less than 7 millimeters of existing vertical bone height. The contraindications for the maxillary sinus elevation and bone augmentation are similar to the contraindications that we have seen with the standard implant surgical procedures, with the additional considerations for the conditions of the maxillary sinus. The patient should be in a good systemic health and free from disease of the maxilla or specifically the disease of the maxillary sinus. The pre-treatment evaluation for the maxillary sinus is basically accomplished with the radiographic techniques. The intraoral periapical radiographs or the orthopantomographs will provide a lot of information about the anatomy of the maxillary sinus. But the internal anatomy of the maxillary sinus can be uh, can be thoroughly assessed with the three-dimensional radiographic projections if it is available. The three-dimensional scans, if they are available, the lateral wall should be assessed for the presence of any medium or large-sized vessels. The medium and large-sized vessels sometimes traverse the lateral wall of the maxillary sinus, and it's very important to identify them and to do the surgery without breaking this without sectioning this large or medium-sized vessels and to prevent the bleeding problem during the procedure. First, we'll see the crust. There are two techniques for maxillary sinus floor elevation. One is a crustal osteotomy technique, and other one is a lateral window technique. First, we'll see the crustal osteotomy technique. In case with the moderate bone height, that is about 7 to 9 millimeters, that requires limited sinus bone augmentation, a crustal approach to elevation may be desirable, or whenever there is sufficient vertical height of the bone is available in the maxillary sinus floor and minimum amount of bone augmentation is required, the crustal approach technique may be preferred. The crustal approach was basically the first described by Summers with the osteotomes. The osteotome technique is an approach that uses osteotomes to compress the bone internally from the alveolar crust upwards against the floor of the sinus, ultimately leading to a inward fracture of the sinus floor bone along with the Schneiderian membrane, which should remain intact above the inward fractured bone. These are the osteotomes that are used for crustal osteotomy technique. They are these are the millimeter markings, and there is increasing order of the osteotomes. These are the straight osteotomes, and these are the angled or the offset osteotomes. Offset osteotomes are useful in the posterior maxilla with the limited mouth opening, so as to align the osteotomes. The alignment of the implants is proper. Here is a diagrammatic representation of a crustal osteotomy technique. And then the osteotomes are used to add bone in this osteotomies, and and the apical controlled apical compressive forces are applied with the hand, and then the bone is increased and added in the incremental order, and the compressive forces are applied in a controlled manner with the hand. If the bone is very dense in the maxillary sinus floor area, mallet also can be used to apply to so as to provide so as to infracture the bone in the sinus floor. This bone fractures, and then the sinus floor membrane also is lifted along with this bone that is fractured. So the and then the bone graft is added, and then the membrane is elevated to the desired depth so that the sufficient vertical height is or the required vertical height is achieved, and then the drilling is if required can be done if the bone is very dense, and then the implants are placed. Crustal osteotomy technique is considered as a conservative approach for sinus floor elevation and bone augmentation procedure, but it is also a blind procedure because the clinician will not be able to see the Schneiderian membrane, but the sinus floor elevation or the and the membrane elevation can only be felt. So the success of this procedure can only be evaluated by taking a radiograph by seeing the bone graft within the sinus. So let's see. So the amount of bone that can be the amount of bone that can be augmented vertically with the crustal approach is about 2 to 7 millimeters. The studies have shown that about 2 to 7 millimeters of increase in the bone height can be achieved with the crustal approach technique. That is the average of about 3.8 millimeters. So whenever bone increase in the bone height of about 4 millimeters is required, crustal approach sinus floor elevation technique can be used. Or whenever more amount of vertical bone augmentation is required, lateral window technique is more preferable. Or whenever there is a rupture of the Schneiderian membrane, or whenever there is a presence of septa, or whenever there is a sloping floor of the maxillary sinus is present, a lateral approach for sinus floor elevation is a more preferred technique. So next we'll see the lateral window technique. Lateral window technique is considered as a more efficient and effective method to access the sinus floor and to do the bone augment and to elevate the sinus floor membrane and to do the bone augmentation. An opening into the maxillary sinus is created to elevate the Schneiderian membrane and to place the bone graft in the space immediately above the existing alveolar bone. Here there are basically two techniques available for lateral window technique. One is to maintain the bone of the lateral window, and second procedure, the bone is completely removed of the lateral window. Bone of the lateral window is completely removed. To maintain the bone of the lateral window, a small diamond burr is a small high-speed diamond burr can be used, or a piezoelectric device can be used to drill off the membrane, to drill out the bone around on the periphery of the lateral window so that the central portion of the bone remains intact. Whereas to eliminate the bone of the lateral window, larger diamond burr can be used to make the bone of the lateral window, very thin, paper thin, and then the membrane is slowly start separating the membrane from the bone with the fine instruments such as a DeMarco curette or Gracie curette 1314 or a universal curette can be used to slowly separate the Schneiderian membrane from the anterior, posterior, inferior, and the superior aspect. And then the larger instruments spoon, such as surgical curettes or membrane elevators can be used to elevate the membrane and to create the new floor. Whenever the bone is maintained of the lateral window is maintained, it can be act as a it can be elevated more superiorly and placed. It helps in the helps with the formation of it helps with the new bone of the floor of the uh, maxillary sinus. If there is a sufficient amount of bone height is available, the implants can be placed simultaneously. To place the implant simultaneously, the bone graft is placed in the anterior, posterior, and the mesial aspect of the sinus so as to maintain the sinus membrane in a superior position. And then the surgical guide is placed so that the implant can be placed in the prosthetically driven position, and the osteotomies are prepared, and then the implants can be placed, and then the bone on the lateral side also can be uh, augment and can be placed, and then the membrane is placed, and then the mucoperiosteal flaps are sutured back. These are the instruments used to elevate the Schneiderian membrane. This is the DeMarco curette, Gracie curette 1314, and the universal curette. And these are the large spoon curettes, and then the medium-sized curved membrane elevators. There are various companies which manufacture special instruments for preparation of the lateral window. This large drill is used to maintain the bone in the central portion, and which drills only the periphery of the uh, lateral window. Whereas these large diamonds burr will can be used to eliminate the bone of the lateral window. There are various instruments which have been developed for crustal window technique also, such as various burrs such as Densa burrs or piezoelectric surgical units are very useful for crustal window technique too. Various bone grafts materials can be used for sinus bone augmentation. The 1996 Consensus Conference on the maxillary sinus floor elevation and bone augmentation concluded that alloplast, xenograft, allograft alone or in combination with the autograft, it can be used for sinus can be used for bone substitute material for bone augmentation procedure. And moreover, the consensus conference concluded that the maxillary sinus floor elevation and bone augmentation procedure is a predictable procedure for placement of dental implants to replace the missing teeth in the maxillary posterior region or to rehabilitate the maxillary posterior region. Autograft, as you all know, is a in this the autograft is considered as a gold standard of all these bone grafts because it has the osteoconductive, osteoinductive, and osteogenic properties. But main disadvantages of autograft is it needs a additional surgical site or a second surgical site with the additional morbidity. Briefly, next I'll explain the ridge splitting or ridge expansion technique. Ridge splitting technique is a useful technique for increasing the bone width and simultaneously placing implants in the narrow ridges. A possible disadvantage is that crustal bone loss may be greater in cases that begin with very narrow ridges. The minimum amount of bone width that is required for ridge splitting technique is about 3 to 4 millimeters, so that 1 to 1.5 to 2 millimeters bone remains on the buccal as well as on the lingual side after splitting the bone in the crustal area. The horizontal split can be made with the 15 number BP blade or the tapered Fisher burr or a surgical saw blade, and more preferably piezoelectric bone surgery device is more preferably used for splitting the bone. If the bone is dense, mesial and distal cuts can be given if the bone is very dense. The main concept behind this bridge splitting technique or the bridge expansion technique is to reposition the buccal and lingual cortical plates and to create the space between these two cortical plates and to place the implants in the within the this space, and which will help in formation of bone in this space around the implants. And then the osteotomy is prepared with the standard implant surgical burrs or with the piezoelectric surgical unit. And the bone is expanded with the screw expanders. After preparing the osteotomy is expanded with the screw expanders, and then the implant is placed. So with this advanced implant surgical procedures, any patient with the edentulous space can be considered for endosseous implants, and it can be considered for true replacement of implant supported processes. With this, I would conclude this session. If you have any doubts or any questions, please make a note and ask me during the recorded session.